Welcome to this leadership video featuring Dr. Gloria N. Francke's career. I am Sarah White, a retired director of pharmacy with a continuing interest in effective pharmacy leadership. The purpose of this video is to illustrate how exerting leadership does not always require a leadership title. As a brief overview of Gloria's career, she graduated from Purdue University in 1942 when few women entered pharmacy. She practiced as both a community and hospital pharmacist. Gloria served on the staff of APHA as the Assistant Director of the Hospital Pharmacy Division and for 11 years as the Executive Secretary for the newly formed ASHP. She went back to college at age 51 and received her PharmD degree. Gloria worked as a drug literature specialist at the National Library of Medicine, Chief Program Evaluation, Bureau of Alcohol and Drug Dependence Service for the Veterans Administration, and held several editorial positions. She also staffed the APHA Office of Women's Affairs and was responsible for global conferences for women pharmacists. Gloria passed away at 86 in 2008. I found her to be one of the most gracious, humble, and passionate, successful pharmacists I've ever met. She developed respect in both ASHP and APHA circles, and to have done so as a woman in the 1940s through the 60s is a remarkable accomplishment. I want to share some of the stories she told me over the past couple of years because they illustrate her successful career as a woman in a male-dominated profession. I also want to provide some quotes from her writings and remarks as insight into her thinking. When I asked her how she picked pharmacy, she told me she grew up in a very small town in Indiana where she just happened to go to work in the one and only community pharmacy when she was 14. When she graduated from high school at 16, she wanted to go to college and fortunately received a county scholarship to Purdue because she didn't really have much money. She indicated pharmacy came immediately to her mind, mostly because the only subject she knew that women studied at Purdue was home economics, and she was quite sure she didn't want home economics as a career. You could tell she was her own person from the beginning. When she graduated in 1942 from pharmacy school, she applied to work for the Eli Lilly Company and received a letter back saying they didn't hire women pharmacists. She said, "I still have that letter," with a twinkle in her eye and a sly smile indicating she showed them they should have hired her. She wasn't angry about this outright discrimination, but then chose to go to the University of Michigan Hospital because one of her college roommates was working there, and we in health system pharmacy are the better for that decision. I found fascinating her involvement in the development of IPA, the International Pharmaceutical Abstracts, which is so successful today. When she lived in Washington, D.C. in the late 1940s and worked for APHA and ASHP, which was then housed in the APHA building, after church on Sundays, she would go to the National Library of Medicine and spend 4 to 5 hours searching the literature for articles that would be of interest to hospital pharmacists. She made an index card of each article because she enjoyed doing it and saw it as sort of a hobby. William Heller, who was at that time a pharmacy intern at Johns Hopkins, happened to see all her index cards and was enthusiastic about the value to others, so he shared looking at other journals with her. They published in the ASHP Bulletin, which later became the American Journal of Hospital Pharmacy, now Health System Pharmacy, 6 comprehensive bibliographies every couple of years from 1951 through 1965. I find it interesting that the first 5 had Bill as the first author and Gloria the second author. It's not until the one in 1965 that she was listed as the first author with Bill the second author. It was these bibliographies that became the basis for IPA that her husband Don Francke started. She said she found the IPA idea and the significant success of it to be unbelievable. She indicated she found it amusing that she got credit for what was more like a hobby rather than real work. Perhaps the message is to try and do what you enjoy, as you never know where it's going to lead you. When talking about her decade as the executive secretary of the newly formed ASHP, she said, "I don't think anybody ever thought of me as anything but a running secretary. I don't think they thought of me as being any kind of a leader at all," which is sort of amusing. She knew she was what kept ASHP together in those early years. The accepted societal expectations at that time were that men were the leaders and women were in supportive roles. She had to lead without really challenging the men. I'm convinced had she been born even 20 years later, she would have been an elected ASHP president, as well as perhaps APHA president. In one of our conversations, she innocently said, "I went to Selma, Alabama, and marched in the civil rights demonstrations, and Don, her husband, knew better than to tell me not to go." She also added, "I suspect that wasn't a safe thing to do, but it was the right thing to do." Her commitment to the larger cause rather than to herself is to be admired, as well as her independence, especially as a woman. When talking about her involvement in international pharmacy, she indicated that at her first meeting in 1953, she gave a paper in French on ASHP, and she said they were amazed to find a young woman from the United States coming in boldly speaking in French, because at the time, FIP was really made up of old men. There just were no women in the organization. She continued saying that decisions tended to be made in locker rooms or after midnight, where women just didn't go. She could travel to any country in the world and personally know pharmacists there. They would actually seek her out with a big hug. I asked her about the pharmacy services in the assisted living facility that she resided in, and she replied, "There aren't any, and I keep telling them that needs to change, but they simply don't listen." So she never gave up speaking out on behalf of pharmacy as her passion because of its value. Gloria was the first woman pharmacist in 1987 to receive the Remington Medal since its inception in 1918. The Remington Medal is the highest award in all of pharmacy. I want to quote from her acceptance of this award, and I quote, "To receive this recognition is beyond my greatest expectations. An occasion such as this deepens our feelings about the profession we all love and nurture. Were I to present a medalist address today, I think I would talk about the burden of leadership, or perhaps the danger of scattering our forces. At times I feel that the burden of leadership prevents most of us from taking responsibility for the destiny of pharmacy. We dare not hold back and merely hope for the best for tomorrow. We must position ourselves to control the future of our profession, not only looking at the issues which benefit us today, but those that endure and will affect pharmacy practice tomorrow. I have a deepening fear that we may be scattering our forces and that pharmacy's future may be the poorer for it. We must have the ability to generate leaders, not a few, but many leaders who have a genuine commitment to the profession of pharmacy and to the men and women pharmacists who practice, who teach, who manage, who manufacture, who write and edit, and who do research. I'm not thinking about power politics. Rather, I'm thinking about bringing about a common view that transcends our areas of practice. This is only one thread that ties us all together. We are all pharmacists. With all of you, the honor of this medal is shared," unquote. These thoughts are just as true today as they were in 1987, and it's a call to action for each of us. In 1955, at the age of 33, her efforts were recognized by receiving the Harvey A.K. Whitney Lecture Award, the highest in hospital pharmacy. As of 2008, she was the second woman of only 9 women to receive it in its 58 years of existence. Her lecture was entitled Responsibilities of ASHP Affiliated Chapters. I am again struck by her message regarding leadership. She discussed 6 qualities of good leaders that I want to paraphrase because they are very applicable today. The first is a harmonious or sympathetic relationship with the group they are working with. The second is ambition, not for ourselves, but for the cause, our profession. I like her statement, leaders take pay for their work, but they do not work for pay. The third quality is knowing where you want to go with your group. You must have a goal. The fourth is face opposition creatively, being tactful, tolerant, and understanding of other people's points of view. The fifth quality is having the skill to inspire confidence in others. And the sixth and final quality, and she said, to me, the most important, leaders must have enthusiasm. In 1997, APHA established the Gloria N. Francke Leadership Mentor Award, and I want to quote briefly from her remarks at that time. And I quote, "To be a mentor is to do what every professional wants to do and to be. To show enthusiasm for the profession we have chosen, to take time to go the extra mile, to know when to lead and when to follow, when to decide and when not to decide, when to dream and when to get things done, are all characteristics which make good leaders," unquote. I had talked with her about recording her for a video such as this shortly before she passed away, and her comment, which was so typical, was, "I just had an ordinary career." But that couldn't be further from the truth. She continued to come to both national and international meetings up until the year she passed away. She was a mentor and a hero for many women because she had been successful in a male-dominated profession. She has been called the First Lady of Pharmacy, and I think that is so true. It was my true pleasure to have known Gloria, and the world of pharmacy is a better place because of her life. I've asked others to join me in sharing their memories of Gloria and her career.
Gloria was a volunteer as the CEO and for many years, and very dedicated, very persistent in what she did, tenacious almost, and I was fortunate enough to take the helm at her retirement. But that didn't end our relationship because I then hired her back on the staff and to handle some of our publication activities, and served as director of our communication system. Gloria had tremendous influence on young people, particularly her interest in women in pharmacy, and she was an inspiration to young ladies who might at the time been reluctant to step forward to take leadership roles and things of that sort. But Gloria was always there, pushing, prodding, pulling, whatever it took. And that didn't limit itself to the domestic scene. She was also successful in the international scene as part of what was called the movement of women in pharmacy. And her involvement in the International Pharmaceutical Federation was critical, and as a result she established contacts with women and young people, not only women at times, then young men and all over the world. And she was a pioneer in her time.
Well, certainly Gloria was one of the most influential people that hospital pharmacy in America, and possibly even in the world, has ever known. Not just because she was Don Francke's wife, but certainly because she worked in so many capacities for the American Society of then Hospital Pharmacists, but in international pharmacy and in just about every other aspect that you can think of, education, publication, and otherwise. I first met Gloria, I feel pretty certain. There's always been a little bit of difficulty with this, trying to establish it for certain, but I worked for a brief period in Alexandria, Virginia, in my only community pharmacy experience. And one day I was drifting around Constitution Avenue, and I spotted that beautiful building there at 2215, where the American Pharmaceutical Association is located. And I just walked in and said, I'd just like to look around and see what this place is all about. And so the receptionist said, well, I'll have somebody come and give you a tour. And as it turned out, this young lady came out and introduced herself. Didn't mean a thing to me. I don't remember that she even gave me her name, and she probably did. But as it turned out, later on, Gloria and I agreed that it was probably her. And this would have been about 1948, so many, many years ago when I first met and knew Gloria, but didn't really know her until much later. And then as I served as the chairman of the Committee on International Outlook for the Christian Pharmacist Fellowship International many, many years later, I had frequent contact with Gloria. She at that time was in the publications business after her husband, Don Francke, had died. And I mentioned to Gloria that there's such a need for pharmaceutical reference work in third world and developing countries that many pharmacists there really had nothing in the way of drug information to go on in building their own programs and developing good pharmacy service. So Gloria, with no hesitation whatever, gave us, I believe, about 500 references out of her publication business that were a little out of date but still be very, very useful in places where there was nothing at all. So she shipped at her own expense to a humanitarian aid agency down in Georgia, who then packaged a few of these books in every one of the shipments that they had going overseas. And so that was a major accomplishment from my standpoint, and recognizing the kinds of things that Gloria could and would do. And she did that with no hesitation whatever, and it must have cost her a fortune to ship a ton of books that way. But in the meantime, I had many other opportunities to be with Gloria at ASHP meetings and programs and things of that sort. And she was always such a gracious lady, always willing to spend time with anyone. And recently I had a young lady that I was trying to mentor a little bit, who I encouraged to spend some time with Gloria if she ever had a chance, because everyone should know Gloria Francke. And so this young lady, as it turned out, met and spent some time with Gloria. Actually spent 5 hours with her chatting and learning about the early days of the American Society of Hospital Pharmacists. So those are just a few observations of a great lady who everybody in American hospital pharmacy or health system pharmacy needs to know about. That she was so gracious, so open, and so willing to spend time with young people. While she was a little older than I am, she nevertheless was always open to me and to everyone else, and did so much good work for ASHP.
I met Gloria when I was an undergraduate at Duquesne University. So we're talking about 50 plus years. And I've never ceased being amazed by her depth. Now, when she came to Duquesne University in the late 1950s, she was the director of the ASHP, holding it together, preparing for turning it over to a full-time staff several years later. She's known by everyone as Don Francke's wife, and much more than that, a partner with Don in so many enterprises over the years. When I came to ASHP, she was managing the journal, and Dawn was doing IPA, and Gloria was doing IPA too. When you would meet Gloria in the hall, she would always say, "Are you having a good day? What kind of a day are you having?" And I've found over the years in conversations with Gloria that you say something and she asks a question, because she is genuinely interested in you and in people. She remembered that I took nieces and nephews to the annual meeting, and the next time around she would say, "Who do you have with you this time, and how is the little girl that was with you the last time. But I think something that people might not recognize is that Gloria has archived and developed the infrastructure for hospital pharmacy through her work at the Don Francke Library at ASHP's foundation, through her work at the National Library of Medicine, and her work at the APHA Library and the American Institute of the History of Pharmacy. She has cataloged and maintained a record for institutional practice. And I know from experience that Don Francke was not the neatest person in terms of having a clean desk and nicely maintained files. And Gloria pulled all of his material together, organized it all, archived it, indexed, turned it over to the appropriate group. Sometimes it was ASHP and sometimes it was one of the other organizations. But that's something that I think she should be remembered for, and something that people really don't recognize her role in performing that task that is not very glamorous, but is terribly important in the big institutional pharmacy picture. Gloria was obviously a role model. She obviously maintained, as I said before, an interest in people, and especially an interest as more women came into the profession. What kind of a career path were they going to have? And she was always so supportive of even mid-career women who might be becoming a bit frustrated. She loved to go to the student sessions. You would have a meeting and you would see Gloria sitting in the back of the session where the students were having a dialogue of some sort, because of her interest in young people and increasingly women being part of that young people group. So there's no question that she has mentored a great number of us and made us realize that there are multiple career paths and that we should pursue whatever we think we would like to do.
There are three themes that come to mind about Gloria. First, she really was one of the pioneers of modern hospital pharmacy. Gloria was involved early on in ASHP, as we both know. She was involved in the development of practice standards in hospital pharmacy, was part of the development of the survey of hospital pharmacy that we came to know as the Mirror to Hospital Pharmacy. So she was a part of that first group of individuals who sort of set the pace for what I think of as modern hospital pharmacy. And she deserves a lot of credit for all of the hard work that she did in that area. Second, I think Gloria was probably the most important leader for and model for women in pharmacy from that period. I never heard Gloria make a big issue of it. I don't think that she was on any campaign, but by the example of her life, I know that she influenced an awful lot of women. And in her wake, we have had great numbers of women in pharmacy, including yourself. The period in which Gloria became prominent was one in which very few women were pharmacy directors. Virtually none were deans of colleges of pharmacy. Virtually none had key leadership roles in the associations. And look where we are today, you know. I think she really did, again, without making a big issue of it, just by living her life the way she did, encouraging women, young women. She took us to a different level in that respect, and I admire her greatly for what she did in that regard. A third area, Gloria became early on in her career involved in international affairs, particularly the FIP. has hardly ever missed a meeting, I would guess. And I just came from this year's FIP, and for the viewers, we're recording this in the fall of 2008, so the meeting was in Basel. And what I noted was that a number of speakers from around the world, not just from the US, but from several European countries, Australia, even South Africa, made comments about we miss Gloria. Spontaneous tributes for the work that she did in international pharmacy. She was well admired and respected for that. You know, just on a personal level, there's another point I'd like to make about Gloria. She took a personal interest in a lot of people and somehow managed to keep up with where we were in our careers. I recall that the last time I saw her was at the 2007 mid-year meeting, ASHP mid-year in Las Vegas. And I saw her in the hall, and she came right up and asked me about what I was doing in my retirement years. She kept up with the fact that I had retired. And in previous years, at every APHA or ASHP meeting I attended, Gloria was there, and we almost always ran into each other, and she would make a point of asking me about whatever it was that I was doing currently, and she kept all of that straight. She was always encouraging, and I would imagine that for people much younger than me, this meant an awful lot to them as they moved ahead in their career, to know that someone like her, an icon really, took personal interest in them.
Gloria's career is one of accomplishment. You know, she has had so many diverse opportunities to impact the profession in virtually every area of practice. And at a time when women really were not in prominent roles within organizations and certainly within professional practice. As a person, she just had the capacity to connect with individuals personally and at a very conversational level. She always remembered you. She always knew things about you. She always had probing questions about your life. And for myself, she always made me feel that I had some potential and that she was interested in seeing that it was realized. I think she gave us the notion that we could do anything, that there were opportunities that we might not have considered that we should be thinking about. I think that she provided that from a distance for many people, and then again up very personally with individuals. When Gloria received the Remington Medal, my daughter was 4 years old, and she was the first woman to receive that honor. And I thought it was important for Megan to see that women could achieve those sorts of accomplishments. And so I took her to that Remington luncheon, and Gloria was very gracious in spending time with her and talking with her. And oddly enough, as Megan was in college at George Washington University, she was working with a professor who was doing a book on women who had made great accomplishments in their careers. And Megan and her professor interviewed Gloria, and she was the focus of a chapter in that book. And it was just a nice closure to that circle.
Talk to me about the evolution you've witnessed with this organization and people in your industry.
Well, as I think about it, it's overwhelming, and I don't think it's anything that I could have predicted. But I do feel that a great deal of it is based on the early years and a continual movement of the organization and of pharmacy education.
Fact is, the book that your husband first wrote, the reference book, is still very much, still very much in use. A lot of the work that you did together, people hold up as a touchstone. That must make you feel really good.
Yes, but it's hard for people to recognize that because the book itself was a little thing like this, which grew all the time. But just the initial work of the idea of getting it out and work on it, and it was a completely voluntary thing with no possibility of making money.
How many of these mid-year clinical meetings have you been to, these conferences?
I think I've been to every one. I could have missed one sometime, but I don't remember missing any. I more remember that I went to every ASHP meeting that ever was from the beginning, except one.
What happened that one time?
I was ill.
Okay, that's a good excuse.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about the meetings and going to all the meetings and the way you've seen, how have they changed?
Well, I think first, the first group of people who were involved in ASHP were completely committed. And so everybody worked very hard together to make a meeting go. And quite frankly, many of them came with very limited budgets, and there were the most women in the group were Catholic sisters. So we were very much under the leadership of these wonderful sisters from all over the country. And they provided a high level of leadership in every aspect. And they would have, if they could have been more outgoing, they would have been more and more involved. But we did finally have a president, Sister Mary Gonzalez from Pittsburgh, Duquesne, as ASHP president. But you see, I don't think this is hardly known today. But if you look at the early pictures, I could be one woman among all these Catholic sisters.
If you were to give some advice to all those pharmacists working now, what would it be, considering your many years of experience? What advice would you give them?
Well, I think first they have to be top practitioners. And almost what came out of this last lecture we heard today, leaders in what they're doing, whether it's leaders of their staff or leaders in the organizations. But I believe it was pointed out this afternoon that only 1/3 of all the pharmacists in the country are members of the national organizations. And that doesn't look good. Or at least the ones who are members are supporting it.
Do you feel good about where your profession is right now?
In most areas, I think it's moving very well, and certainly in education. I think the pharmacists coming out of school now have the very good education, plus the opportunities for residencies and other moving on wherever they want to. In some ways, there is a lack of level of practice, particularly in small hospitals and in retirement communities where they offer assisted and hospital services. And some places, for instance, where I live, we do not even have pharmacy service.
Have you enjoyed yourself in Las Vegas?
Have I what?
Enjoyed yourself here in Las Vegas?
Oh, yes, but I just go to meetings and eat and drink.